Welcome to the Cracking the Growth Code podcast, where we explore practical growth and leadership insights to take you and your organization to the next level. I'm your host, Matt Zembruski, and I'm honored to have as my guest today, Sally Curtis. Sally's a content monetizing, repurposing whiz and an outside-of-the-box thinker who loves amplifying others. She works with brilliant individuals to leverage their content to engage and entice their audience through the power of visuals. Sally is best known for turning books into 2 years of social media posts, and her award-winning content marketing agency works with changemakers across the globe. She was recently voted one of the top 20 Australian female podcasters. She started her career working with Australia's most influential business leaders, helping them fill their events nationally and internationally with exceptionally high conversion rates. Then she went on to do this for herself and then mentored others. This led her to find the secret of engaging her audience through dynamic visual content and humanly connected conversations. Sally, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to share with you today.
I'm really excited. There's so many questions I have for you, and as we get things started, you and I had a chance to meet briefly before we got to know each other a little bit, but I'd love to have you, if you could introduce yourself and your company, what your role is, what you're passionate about, just sort of tee things up so our audience can get to know you a little bit better as we get it started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm obviously you've given me a great introduction, so I won't recap that like I would normally. So I'm very much an outside of the box thinker. My skill has been being an opportunist. So my business and I have evolved as the market has needed me. So I've had multiple evolutions and revolutions within my personal brand and my business. So that's, I think, is something very important for people to know, is that you don't always have to be the same. I change and ebb and flow depending on what the market needs. I've got a quote. I'm always told I'm bossy, but it's from a leadership perspective, bossy. If I was a man, I would be seen as being a leader. So I'm going to own that I am actually bossy, and I've got a naughty personality. And I'll say that by saying I love ferrets, which are also naughty and have a cheeky personality. So I'm going to leave the introduction there and just leave people dangled with that little bit of extra insight.
Now I have all these visions going through my head of ferrets and you being bossy with people and everything. So, wow.
Absolutely.
Well, let's and you tied it to leadership too, which is one of our key themes here, which is really cool. And you also brought in the dynamic of gender bias that's out there, right? When certain actions are taken by men versus women, how it's interpreted differently. Let's move to a basic question. How do you define leadership?
I've had so much fun answering these questions, prepping for these questions. To me, leadership is actually self-responsibility. So that's how I define it. It's that self-responsibility. And if I look so I'm highly visual. So if I look to my TV shows that I love, so I love all the Jerry Bruckheimer sort of TV series where there's a diverse group, a diverse team of genders, of ages, of ethnicities, etc. But they're just saving the world, doing cool stuff together and working as a team, and they just make the impact. They save the world. So I love that element. So that's that self-responsibility. That's everybody working in a team, but they're all self-responsible, but they're responsible for each other as well. Then if I look at the movies that I love, which tend to be a little bit more love story based, but the self-responsibility element through there is different for me. It's the who they become. So they've got the journey and the challenge and, all those other setbacks that relationships have and businesses have and leaders have. And they actually become better because of each other. So they become more powerful together. But they're still individuals. They've still got that self-responsibility and self-worth, etc. But they're just better because of each other. They've grown because of each other. So I hope that gives you a bit of insight as to what self-responsibility and leadership is for me.
Yeah, I love that. What I heard you say, and I'll say it in my own words, is that, bringing out the best in yourself is that self-responsible leadership, but knowing like where your where your skill set is, where your genius or where your flow state is. Like, what is that? I love those shows too. I've seen a number of them over the years, and it's wonderful to see all these different people, backgrounds, genders, and everything. But everybody finds their own lane, and then they work together. Because the second part of what you said is when two people come together, whether it's romantically in a more romantic oriented movie, or if it's with a team trying to rob somebody in some movie or whatever, when people come together and bring out the best in each other as they're sharing their best, that's like another level. So I love the way you phrase it, Sally. Really.
And I was just going to say, the other thing that is often an understated team that's like that relationship is a CEO and his executive assistant. That dynamics of both making each other supremely better is a very typical thing within corporate that gets underestimated.
That's an excellent example. And I love the fact that you're bringing in stories and examples, that everyone can relate to. And I haven't heard that one before, but I know that it's dead on because it makes so much sense to me too. I've seen that in a lot of cases where you have an executive, senior executive with a company and an executive assistant for that person. Whether it doesn't matter who's male or female, but when that match is really strong and tight, and they know how to bring out their best and complement each other, it can work really, really well for the company and for their ability to lead the organization.
Yeah, the magic then flows from the top down, as you sort of said. They get into that flow state, and it does flow down the organization.
That's exciting. Well, that leads into talking about multiple people. How important do you feel it is to hire and grow strong, effective leaders in your company or in companies that you consult with?
Cool. Great question. I'm going to challenge the word strong, and I'm going to rephrase that to being directionally correct. So I love it, and that's allows for that flow. But with that flow and that directionally correct elements, then clarity can come out because you've got flow, you're working directionally correct, and you've got movement and innovation and those sorts of things. And when you've got that level of clarity and flow, that's where the strength comes from. That's the powerhouse. That's the power of it all. And then the directionally correct element from a leader's perspective, that sort of makes straightforward sense. But the ability to be able to communicate that directionally correct status, which is constantly moving to a degree, being able to communicate that in a way that actually helps the individual empower themselves so they can then find their flow. And then as a result, you've got that the flow of the creativity, the innovation, and then the strength trust then comes from that strength. So does that sort of weave in and make sense the way I've said that?
Yeah, it does. And I love the way you rephrase that to directionally correct, because when you're directionally correct, which is constantly changing, if you have that type of harmony with leadership and your ability to communicate, then things can work really well. And so I like the way you describe that, because you're right. It sort of amps up the energy and the potential energy of where that organization or that team can go.
Yeah, and you harmonize. If I reuse some of your words, you're harmonizing potential.
Yeah,
which means out of it.
Yeah, and that's good. Which speaks to how important it is to find the right fit, right? Because there's no perfect person for every situation, right? You want to find the right match.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Sally, let's talk about hiring for a minute. When you hire someone new to join your company, or if you're consulting, I know you work with a lot of influential leaders and companies around the world. If you hire someone new to join an organization, what are the top 3 attributes that you would recommend you look for in a candidate?
Cool. I'm going to freak people out here and say I never, ever, ever hire superstars.
Wow.
I always look for newbies or the underdog. Keeping in mind, though, that my business is entirely remote. So obviously I look for freelancers that are remote and those sorts of things on the freelance platforms like Upworks, etc., or referrals or recommendations from other people. So I don't hire superstars, and I'll come back to that. But the attributes I look for is I look for a certain talent or a giftedness. Now, because we're a digital marketing agency that specializes in that content, a lot of what we do is content creation, content repurposing. So that's graphic work. So we do a lot of graphic work. So for me, I look for people that have, yes, creativity, but I look for the giftedness that I look for is that they see or interpret things differently. They might see a different depth to a photograph, for example. So that's one that I look for. Is I look for their giftedness. And these two are going to sound as though they're opposing, but I also look for the ability to follow instructions. So I just do a simple instruction task just to make sure they can follow instructions. But I also look for initiative as well. And I know those two sound a bit wrong together. So there's following instructions and then there's initiative. So following instructions is don't go off too much a tangent. And, you're talking to a rebel. I'm always off on a tangent and being contained. So there's that initiative to sort of speak up, to make suggestions, to add value in from that perspective. The other thing that I'll often do is coming back to that I don't hire superstars, is I'll often hire 3 and keep 2. So what often happens in that scenario is somebody will absolutely shine brighter above everybody else. Somebody drops the ball, e.g. they don't turn up and they're not on time and those sorts of things, which is a pet peeve of mine. And the other scenario is that the second person usually has a completely different gift set that I can use somewhere else in an organisation. So that's something I don't know who told me to do that. I don't know why I do that, but I've done that for years and have suggested that to a number of people when they're hiring their first VA, for example, and it just seems to work.
So you would if you're hiring a VA, you would hire 3 VAs to do different pieces of work, and then look for the one superstar or the person who emerges to be the right fit for your team, to use a different word, and then. And then the second one may stay on with you or they may go somewhere else, but then the third one obviously isn't a fit, so you move on to them.
And the reason I do that, especially with the clients that we work with that are thought leaders and speakers, everybody, when they're hiring their first VA, they want that magic superstar VA, which is why I've mentioned I don't hire superstars, that does accounting, that does creative work, that knows how to do a marketing plan, that can do the budget, that can keep them organised. So straight away with that sort of array, they're all different they're all different skill sets, they're different personalities. So you're not going to get everything in one person. You're hiring for 20 hours or 10 hours, you can go, well, let me hire 2 people with the 2 skill sets that are most important right now for half that time, and you get better speed, you get better flow, you get better outcomes because you've put the right people in the bus on the right spots. You've not just put the people on the bus, so to speak.
I like that a lot. And I love, I know some of those were, to some listeners may seem like they contradict each other, but I love how it's a blend of different sides. It's sort of like the yin and the yang, right? There's different sides of it. The yin and the yang are together, right? And you're not just all masculine energy. You're not just all feminine energy. You want to be a blend. So it's a blend of, and you alluded to, you didn't use the term, but I'll bring it back from your introduction, the out of the box thinking. You want someone who sees things differently, sees opportunity, and can express themselves, but also follow orders. So it's follow instructions. I love that. Initiative is so important. It's important to have a self-starter. I like your approach with hiring 3 for little pieces to make sure you got the right people in the right seats on the bus, because it's tough. I've asked a lot of leaders and a lot of executives around the world, how do you know in the interview process if it's the right fit for the culture and things? And you don't know. That's the answer. You don't know. And the person has to start. They got to get going. And then you're going to be surprised by either how good they do, or they fit in like you expected, or they fall apart and it doesn't work. So exactly. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, let's talk about the interview then. So during an interview, to get to those answers that you're looking for as you're assessing the candidate, what is one of your favorite questions, or 2 if you have 2, to ask somebody in an interview?
Yeah. I usually will say, so I assume that you have cyber stalked me. And if I see that, so in other words, before they've come to me, have they gone on my LinkedIn? Have they, been on Facebook, have they checked out the website, have they stalked and observed, and in other words, have they researched, have they done their homework?
Mm-hmm.
And if I see that blank look, to me, that's almost, you're sort of out, because somebody needs to have done homework as it relates to me, because that's the level of homework and initiative that I need for what we do with our client work. They need to be able to understand and interpret and get where our clients come from and what they're passionate about and those sorts of things. And you only do that by doing really good research of, checking somebody out.
So do you ask them something like, what do you think about our company based on what you've seen in the media or anything? You just...
No, I just asked them that question. I assume you've cyber stalked and just see oh yes, I've checked this out and checked this out, and they'll sort of say, oh yeah, listen to your podcast, or we'll have a conversation around that question, or it just completely flatlines. And then the second question that I ask is, what's one thing that you've seen needs improving, is needs updating, or something that needs changing, and if they answer that, really confidently, that just shows an incredible level of bravery for me, and courage, and the ability to have honest conversations.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, so and they've obviously seeing things, because our business is all about seeing things, so that so everyone will intuitively and instinctively see things. It's we just, as humans, we do that. But are they then brave enough to recall it quickly and actually say it?
That's fantastic. Those are two very unique questions. I love asking that question, because your answers are your questions are very unique and powerful. Yeah. I'm going to steal some of these and use them in my interviews. So let's shift into the industry. I know I'm in America, United States. You're in Australia, and there's lots of things happening globally. There's lots of things happening locally as well. What do you see? And you operate with a lot of leaders, a lot of companies, repurposing content and helping really leaders and companies, I would say, grow faster and build their brand faster and easier with your ability to help them do that. So looking at the world, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the industry today that companies are dealing with, that leaders are dealing with? And it doesn't have to relate to your services necessarily. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that are out there facing companies today?
Probably do it as a sort of tag team into both of those answers. I'm going to call it something that we call it here in Australia, and it's purely because one of my coaching clients works with this. So we see rushing women's syndrome, but it's equally the same for men. We're all rushing to get stuff done. So, and I'll explain how that works and becomes sort of problematic or a challenge for us. So as a marketing agency, people come to us because they want speed to market. They come to us with content and they want multiple pieces turned around quickly so they can increase their visibility and their consistency on social media. So we are a fast turnaround business. And we're great at that, because obviously the pace comes from the leader, and I am very fast paced. And it's very easy to get stuck in that rushing woman syndrome, or that rushing syndrome, especially as the world at large is speeding up. So the biggest challenge is actually keeping that humanized element, that humanized conversation. And I'll give two examples around that, two quite different examples. I, at the beginning of the year, said to my team, okay, what's worked? So two scenarios: what's worked for you and what's worked for the organisation? What hasn't worked for you? What hasn't worked for the organisation? And what should we improve and what shouldn't we improve? And oh my God, the insights from my team was phenomenal. It blew my socks off. And can I just say, imagine if I'd done that every quarter instead of just So that's my first point of a learning I've had. And then a second example actually occurred to me yesterday. I met a fabulous person off LinkedIn, very similar conversation to what we had lots of synergy. And then when I jumped off the call, I got an email from her, so much thanks so much for, connecting and blah, blah. It was an automated email from within the calendar setup system, which we've all got these days.
Yeah.
But about an hour later, I got a secondary one that was around, it was so great to chat with you. Let's keep in contact, that type of theme. But that one was automated as well.
It was.
It was an automated one, and it was like, get the first one, all about automation, but that second one, I needed more of a touch point, and that's where I sort of talk about that we a great human being, but that just didn't land as a human being. So that's part of that rushing that we get into, that speeding up that we're all doing and the world is doing. If we can just track it back a little bit and just remember that we are actually people and that we actually are humans, and we want that little, we actually want to feel like we've just, had a thank you from a human.
Yes. I love that example, and I love that you talk about keeping the human factor in. I talk about this all the time, and it's a big thing for me. I mentioned to you earlier, but both my parents are human resources their whole careers. So my brother and I put people at the center of our world. That's how we see things. And the example you just gave is a great one. It's important to automate tasks and activities and things, especially when you're going out to a wide number of audience or number of touch points, maybe where you don't have a relationship yet, right? So the automation is important there. But once you have a relationship with someone, or if you had a conversation with them live on Zoom, you get to know them a little bit. I agree with you that one automated message is fine, but you should get a real message, same day, ideally, human to human, to keep that human factor in there. It's just so important.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that with that speeding up scenario, if I come back to team meetings and that leadership perspective, and if I look at the, the mirror over my business is, yes, we have, a weekly team meeting, which helps keep the directionally correct stuff and keeps things on tasks. But as a completely virtual business, what we miss out on, and this relates to that connectivity, is what I'm going to call the water cooler conversations. You don't, that's where, to me, that real innovation comes from. So how can you have more of that in your own business? For us, that's is now for us, we often will do those over communicating. So the girls will ping me and we'll send a message backwards and forwards, but we're now trying to do that 15 minutes each day with each team member. And I know that sounds like a lot, but oh my God, that makes such a huge difference to the innovation that happens within my business. And we've only been doing that for 3 weeks. And it's just, so, it's making opportunities to be human, which then maximizes and leverages the activity and the output of the people, which obviously helps the bottom line of an organization.
Yeah, that relates a lot. In my world, it comes up from project management, then goes into agile and agile coaching. This whole agile transformation, when you get into Scrum and Kanban and this type of way. In Scrum, it has this thing called the retrospective, which you've probably heard of before. But that's very similar to what you just talked about, where you did it with your team. Hey, what went well? What could have been better? How can we improve our company, especially beginning of the year or the beginning of each quarter? Great thing to do. Agile teams out there in the world, most of them run on 2-week sprints, and they do, the ones who are doing Scrum and sprints, they have a retrospective at the end of each 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, the team is stopping and looking back and saying, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do to improve? So that's similar to what you talked about, and it's very enlightening if you have the trust with the people and people can speak openly. They're not worried about, well, the boss is here, so we can't speak freely, right? You want to have a safe environment to do it, but that's a very powerful aspect of it. I love how you're tapping into the potential and the creativity and intellectual capacity of the people on your team, because you're saying, hey, what suggestions do you have? Even in the interview, what suggestions do you have for us to make us better? Yeah. And that's very powerful. And it takes a lot off your shoulders, I can tell, because instead of you having to be the one person who answers everything, now you have a collaborative, again, back to the theme of bringing out the best in everybody, and the sum total of everybody is bigger when they're harmonizing together.
And as a leader, the bottom line for me, and I see this because of the leaders I work with and have this from my own experience, is as the leader or the person with the inner genius around a thing, because we sit inside our own jar, we actually can't read our label. So it's taken me, all of these years to know what it is that I do well. So I actually know what the label is on my jar, and I know what it is. But because most people haven't or are going through the journey of finding that, or the next evolution is you're finding that next thing, is when you don't read your label, when you're sitting inside your jar and you can't read your label, what you do effortlessly is unseen by you and therefore not valued by you, but everybody around you sees it and highly values it. So sometimes it's about us being brave enough to ask, what is it that I do really, really well that annoys the crap out of you that you wish you could do? Because generally it annoys everybody else that you can do it so effortlessly, and that's why it's your gift.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what you're saying is it's easier for other people outside of you to see it than you oftentimes. And that's so important. I've done that exercise a number of times over the years where I ask my parents and my brother, friends, other people who I'm close to, business associates, and hey, what am I good at? What do you think I'm weak at? What can I improve on? And then it really helps you sort of suss out what your strengths are. And then as a team to do that is powerful. So yeah. This leads into the next question I have, and you started to answer it a little bit, but if you want to elaborate on it, what do you think is in your organization is doing very well in terms of its culture today? You've talked about several aspects that you do, but for your company, the culture, what do you think is good and positive about your culture that you're going to keep nourishing and growing going forward?
Definitely, though, the innovation and the honest conversations, even for us, because we are fast-paced, it is difficult has been difficult to keep that culture, because we get and we forget those, the meetings go back to once a week instead of all those check-in points. So being a control freak, if it's not in the diary, it doesn't get done. So everything gets scheduled in the diary. See, the bossiness is coming out. And then if it's scheduled, it then happens. So yes, we might not need it or we might not want it, but it's in the schedule. Let's just stop. It's that reflectivity and then have a conversation around it. I don't think, if I look, past and then future with just those few weeks that we've been doing it, you miss the insights that one of the team members or the girls will have seen something or found a new tool or changed the way we do something that just speeds up or improves something. If you don't over communicate, you miss stuff. You miss opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did that answer you? I went off on a bit of a tangent, then I got bossy.
No. I love it, Sally, and I want to go off on that tangent a little bit more, actually, do your team members, I know everybody's virtual, spread all over the place, sometimes do they work together, like without you, they're working like they pair up or triple up on something?
They do. It's been really interesting. I've had to really facilitate that with them because, like me, they tend to get stuck in their racetrack. So I will often tag the two of them into a team. Into a task. Can you two please work on this? Can one of you do this and one of you do that? And then let's meet up when you've each done that, and then we'll catch up on the next bit. So they do work collectively. They work collectively incredibly well. I would like to see them collaborate more. And I think that's the missing piece with that culture piece, is having those more 15-minute conversations that will actually naturally occur because we're over communicating, whereas before it was a weekly meeting. We're all in our silos, which is a typical thing across organisations, and we were just doing our stuff and we were coming together and doing stuff collectively but not collaboratively.
So in the 15 minutes that you want to do daily, that's with the whole team together, right?
I'm actually doing, so it's a bit of a mix. I often will do it with each of, there's 3 girls that I'll do it with, so separately. And then if there's something that we are working on specifically together, then we'll do a 15 minutes collectively. So it's individual with me, and then it will be collectively, because one will have said something and oh, that's gold, and then the next one will say something else that's gold, and I went, oh, we actually need to talk about that together. So it's actually piecing the insights together.
I love it.
Capture it, and you often capture the deeper insights when it's just one-on-one, because there's always one person in a group meeting that's more vocal than the other one. So it's just sort of, I find it easier doing it individual and then collective.
Yeah, I like that, and that's a good model. I often ask that in interviews. How do you, if you're coming into a team or you're going to lead a team, how do you start to develop your relationships? And what I often look for is exactly what you just said is, well, I'd like to have one-on-one meetings to get to know people and then bring some learnings and some shared understandings to the group when we have that, but knowing that the group does not communicate as freely and as deeply as it would in one-on-one. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, that, if one team member's got a sick child or is sick themselves, they'll tag another team member to pick up the slack. So that's a productive collaboration. But the ideas is different, because I think ideas are more emotionally and more personal to us. So it's just different. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very true.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind this up, I have a really, really good question to ask you, because we have a lot of current and future leaders who, and we're growing our subscriber base all the time, and a lot of questions and a lot of curiosities from different folks who I've talked to is about what they can do tangibly to take away. So they see Sally in Australia, successful businesswoman doing all these things. They're like, okay, what about me as a leader? For the listeners, what would be your top 3 tips for leaders today to help take themselves and their organizations to the next level?
I'm going to say be brave. And by be brave, I mean be bold enough to share and continue to add value and insights wherever you can. Everybody's individual wisdom, insight, giftedness is highly valuable to other people because of that effortless nature it is for us. So sharing how and why you do things will actually give somebody else an aha moment. And that's a really great way to add value to yourself and demonstrate your value to an organization. It's also, to me, part of a personal branding strategy or a future-proofing yourself type strategy as well. But it's very honest and very authentic, and it's easy to do. But it's a habit. So it's getting into doing that. So being that person. And you do that by being that person to your co-workers around you, and then in the meetings if you have to be bold and grow into that bravery. The other thing I would say is try to remain and be present and connected in that human way. And then through that level, and that comes through that sharing. So always being that human that's sharing. And in that aspect, you actually are very approachable, you're very connected, and you sort of almost become that go-to person, the support person, because of the value adding and the help that you're doing. And then the one thing that I don't think we do as individuals enough, again, because of the world being a fast-paced and that we're all speeding up and those sorts of things, is actually asking ourselves, actually doing, but we have to ask ourselves the question, do more of what is working. So utilizing that reflection of what is working for you at the moment, because generally as the world speeds up, we start chasing more bright, shiny butterflies. They're great and they're inspiring and it's good, but I remember one of my coaches saying to me at one point, and I can't remember whether we did discuss this, the money is in the boring. Meaning the things, instead of chasing the bright butterflies, if you knuckled down and did more of what's working, that's where the magic happens. That's where the magnification comes. That's where the amplification comes, whether you're a leader or an entrepreneur or working with somebody else. Doing more of what is working is where you've got maximum leverage. But we get bored with it. So it's a habit. So that would be my last tip.
Those are beautiful 3 tips, Sally. Be brave, be courageous in your actions, right? So you can really express yourself to really help bring out your best, bring out the best in those around you, and be human, be connected. Don't forget the human factor, right? Connecting the humans, and then doing more of what's working. Like you said, I love that, because it's easy. It's easy to skip over that. Well, we're already doing that. Like you said, it's boring. Let's just move on to something new and try to do this. It's a new app or new gadget or something. But if you double down or triple down on what's already working, wow, you can put yourself way ahead. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
those are fantastic tips, Sally. Thank you so much for all your tips, your insight, your stories, everything. Can't wait to have you back on already. This has been a fantastic ride and adventure across the world here on our global podcast. And so thank you very much for your time and your energy today, Sally. Absolutely enjoyed having you on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me such brilliant questions, and I look forward to another set. Thank you very, very much.